Okay, this is lesson 8.5, Constructing Circle Graphs. Before you begin watching this recording, please have your textbook opened up to page 296. We're going to look at question 4, and I'm going to do that with you during this recording. Before you continue, please make sure that you copy and complete the table that is given in the question on a separate sheet of graph paper as you do your calculations. Now, anything that I copy down, you should be copying down on your page as well. So I'm going to give you an opportunity if you need to pause the recording and get these materials with you. Please do that now. I'm going to continue with the question. The question states, Liam sorted and counted his hockey cards and decided to make a circle graph of the types of cards he had. So we can see here, according to the question, he had 20 forward cards, he had 16 defense cards, and he had 4 goalie cards. Remember that for any data that you're given to construct a circle graph, you need to make sure that you calculate the totals. You won't always be prompted to calculate the total, but you always have to do that, because otherwise you can't go on to the next steps. So in this case, 20 plus 16 plus 4 equals 40. So in total, he has 40 cards in his collection. Now what we need to do is calculate the percent of the total. Now remember, for these types of questions, you are allowed to use your calculator. So what you're going to do, and I'm just going to put down a reminder down here. So for the forward, he has 20 cards. The total is 40. So 20 divided by 40, if you punch that in your calculator, you'll get 0.5. Okay, I'm actually going to fill out the decimal column here, 0.5, okay, which is 50%. Now, same thing for the defense. The defense here, you have 16 defense cards. You're going to divide that by the total number of hockey cards, which is 40, and punch that into your calculator, and you will get 40% or 0.4. Notice I'm doing 2 columns at the same time. So the decimal that I got was 0.4, and I know that translates into 40%. The next are the goalies, or the goalie cards. The goalie cards that you have, it's 4 divided by the total number, which is 40 cards. Okay, so when you punch that into your calculator, you get 0.1. Oops. You get 0.1. So I jot that down on the chart up here, 0.1 or 10%. What's nice about this chart is that it neatly organizes all your data for you. Now, when you add up these totals, this obviously should add up to 100%, and we know it does. When you add up these totals, you should get 1.0. Now, in reality, you will often work with numbers that won't neatly work out to equal 100%, because you may end up with decimals. In that case, you would have to round your percent to the nearest whole number. Okay, again, I'm going to repeat. If you have numbers that don't work out as nicely as this data set does, please make sure you always round your numbers to the nearest whole number. So when you're adding up your percents or your decimals in that case, you may not necessarily get exactly 100%, but you should be close. Same with the decimal. In that case, you may not necessarily get 1, but you should be close. Now we have our percents, and now we have our decimals, which correspond to the numbers of types of cards out of 40. What we need to do next, before we even construct our circle graph, is figure out what the central angle is. Now, that's the last column up here, but since there's not enough room to do the calculations, I'm going to do them down below. Now again, I'm just going to do it in a different color so that it's more easily distinguishable. So with the forward, we calculated that the decimal equivalent was 50%. So it's 0.5. So 50% of the total is represented by the forward cards. We're going to take that number and multiply that by 360 degrees, because remember that 360 degrees is the sum of the central angles in a circle graph. So we want to find 50% of 360 degrees, and that's going to be the size of the angle that we're going to draw for our circle graph. 50% of 360 is 180 degrees. So 180 degrees is going to be the size of the angle that's going to correspond to the forward section. Next, we do the defense cards. For the defense cards, we just determined that the decimal equivalent of 16 out of 40 was going to be 40%, or 0.4. We take the decimal, 0.4, we multiply that by 360 degrees, okay, and we end up with 0.4. Again, you can take your calculator for this part. We end up with 144 degrees. So the size of the angle that we're going to draw for that section to represent the number of defense cards will be 144 degrees. Now finally, we have the goalie cards. The goalie cards are represented by this total 0.1, or 10%, which is 4 out of 40. So we're going to take 0.1, multiply that by 360 degrees, and we end up with 36 degrees. So that's an easier calculation because you're just moving the decimal one place to the left. Okay? Now, these are the size of angles that we need to have in our graph. Now, what you need to do next is take your compass and your protractor. First, take your compass, and what I'm going to have to do is extend the page here. Okay, I'll leave that as a reference still. I'm going to take the compass here. Now, I guess it doesn't really matter what size of radius you draw. Try to have a radius of at least, I guess, 5 centimeters in this case, but I'm a bit limited in the amount of room I have, so I'm just going to probably do a little bit bigger. See how big that one goes. Okay. Pause. So now I've drawn my circle. As I've mentioned before, you probably want a circle with a radius of at least maybe 5 or 6 centimeters. Next, you're going to take your compass and you're going to start drawing in these angles. Now remember, you need 3 angles to make up this circle graph. So you're going to take your protractor, and what's good about having a compass is that the middle of the circle is marked for you, but unfortunately now I've lost the middle, so I'm just going to try and manipulate this here. Okay, I'm going to make the protractor a bit bigger so you guys can see. Okay. So what I've done is I've drawn my radius just across one part of the circle to start forming my first angle that I'm going to draw. Now, what I'm going to draw first is actually pretty easy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start, because our forward angle is 180 degrees. Again, 180 degrees represents the section of the number of forward cards he has. It's actually half the circle already, so that makes it pretty easy. So you just have to extend your radius so you have the diameter, which is awesome. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say already that this part is going to be forward cards. Oops, it's a little bit of delay here. Forward cards. So I'm going to say, back to our original calculations, that represents 50% of the total. You always label your circle graph sectors or sections with the percent of the total it represents. Now, because we only have 2 sections left, we just have to measure one angle, and the other side of that angle should be the other side of the angle. Okay, so now we've determined that The forward section is 50%. So what we need to do is calculate the angle that's 144 degrees, which represents the number of defense cards we have. So what we do is we take our protractor and we measure where 144 degrees is, and that's approximately here, and we make our mark here, so that is 144 degrees. And we're just going to mark our center vertex. I'm going to take away the protractor because actually we are finished with the constructing the circle graph. So if I take that away, we now have this section represents the defense cards, and 144 degrees represents or corresponds to 40% of the total is defense cards, which means the remaining 36 degrees, and it's already done for you, is the goalie cards, or are the goalie cards, and that is 10% of the total. So again, if you add 40 plus 10 plus 50, you get 100%. The final thing that you do need to include on your circle graph is a title. Now unfortunately, I've run out of room, so I'm going to put the title down below. Preferably the title should be at the top. And what this should represent, Liam's hockey card collection. Okay, so there you go. That's how you do a circle graph. So again, at any time, if you want to replay any part of the video to repeat it, please go ahead and do so.
Thanks. Thanks. I needed to finish it, so I just needed like that. So thanks, guys.